The genesis of this book came when I was a student and I travelled across the United States on a Greyhound bus, that romantic way that you do, and the bus stopped in an out-of-the-way place called Cheyenne in the middle of the state of Wyoming in the middle of the night. And there I was at 3 in the morning with absolutely nothing to do except walk around the state capital of Wyoming, and I found this gigantic statue of a woman. And I walked up to this thing, and what was it? It was a statue to Esther Morris, who was said to be the woman who gained the vote for women in Wyoming in 1869. And that's absolutely amazing to me. 1869, which is some 50 years before women got the vote fully in the United Kingdom. How could this be happening in such a strange, out-of-the-way place, a world first? That was the genesis of the book, and what's happened over subsequent years is that I've looked at radicals and nationalists working in different fields and trying to progress liberal politics throughout the world, and I started to look at how women got the vote in Africa, in the Muslim world, in Latin America, and in a variety of different places, as well as the traditional and very well previously told tales of how women got the vote in Britain and in the United States and in some European nations. And what I've done is put all these stories of how women got the vote together into one book which looks chronologically and globally about the achievement of the women's vote from the time when no women had the vote at all, which is for national elections before the 1890s, up to the late 20th century when every woman had the vote, and it was, except in some small countries where it would be a sign of backwardness that they didn't have. The book has a global reach, and so I'm trying to give a reasonable amount of attention to areas which have hardly been studied at all. So I'm very keen on looking at how people got the vote in Africa, for example, which particularly happened following decolonialization, and how people got the vote in Latin America, where women were arguing for the vote at the same time as men were arguing for the vote, and so you have a very different kind of dynamic in some regions from others. I'm looking also at the Muslim world, where there was a big enfranchisement among some Muslim nations in the 1950s, and nothing happened in others, in the more conservative nations, and so you had places like Kuwait and Oman and Saudi Arabia with no action at all, right up to the 21st century. And then in these Muslim nations, they started paying much more attention to democracy in general, and more attention to women having the vote and women having something of a share in what political influence was made more freely available. One of the things that I've looked at is the contribution of nationalism to women's getting the vote. So it is sometimes felt that women got the vote because they campaigned very hard, that it was a matter of a pressure group, and pressure groups certainly helped to put this issue on the agenda and to keep it on the agenda. However, for the final push for whole nations to make a decision, now half our population, or in some cases more than half our population, is going to have the political power. For that to happen, I would say there had to be some major change, some major challenge to established order, and it happened through revolution and through war most commonly. And the first big time this happens is in the First World War, and if you look at a graph which shows the number of countries enfranchising women, there's this big leap at the time, at the end of the First World War. So the war hadn't even ended before Britain enfranchised women to a limited extent, for example. However, it didn't mean winning the war. Winning the war actually didn't do it. There were some countries that were on the winning side of the war, such as France, that didn't enfranchise women after the First World War, and other countries who were on the losing side, like Germany, which did enfranchise women, even though the suffragist organisations at that time really didn't expect it to happen. They thought the war was a very masculine activity and would sweep away any female aspirations, and they were actually completely wrong about that. It has been war, a nationalist expectation, which has contributed to women, has meant finally that women got the vote, even in countries where they'd been arguing peacefully about it for a very long time previously.